What's up, guys? 大家好，朋友们. What's up, friends? This is Ben Parker back with another video in which I kind of share my experiences learning Mandarin Chinese and also Japanese as well. So if you go back to the first video I posted, I think like a couple months ago, you'll see a video in which I share, hey, is learning Chinese and Japanese on YouTube possible? In which I say, 对啊，そうですね, like, yes, it is. You can do it. 你可以. The topic of today's video is on tones, okay? And if you want to, and more specifically, just kind of my thoughts on learning a tonal language coming from an English speaker's perspective, and also just whether or not, uh, you know, um, learning tones is as scary as it should be, right? Because this is something that I think intimidates a lot of English speakers from learning Chinese. They hear that Chinese has tones, and it freaks them out. And so I want to kind of help share kind of my perspective on learning tones, and whether or not it's something you should, how worried about it you should be, and how big of a hurdle it is to learning Chinese. Um, so the first thing I want to get out of the way about tones with Chinese is they are important. They're very, very important. If you mess up your tones um, in certain situations, you can say the wrong thing, and it can be kind of embarrassing. So you do need to learn your tones. It's just the nature of the language. Um, so the classic example is ma 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 ma. All mean different things in Chinese. So the first tone, ma means mother, ma means numb, ma means horse, and ma means to chastise or to scold, right? Um, and there are other examples too, like 我要买衣服, which is like I want to buy clothing. But if you say 我要卖衣服, it says I want to sell clothing. So my third tone means buy, and my fourth tone means to sell. And in this video, I'm not going to like write out characters and write out the words because I'm just talking about tones. But those are just two examples. So my means to buy, my means to sell. So that's just one example um, in which the getting the tone wrong from a third tone to fourth tone. It's the same pinyin, same pronunciation, but a different way of saying it. But uses a different tone, it has a different meaning. Buying versus selling, and obviously there's a difference between buy and sell, right? That's just one example. Another kind of one is the word uh, when. When third tone means to kiss somebody, and when means to ask somebody question. Okay, so another one, you don't want to go up to somebody and say, oh, like. 我要问你一个问题, I want to kiss you a question, or 我要问你, I want to kiss you, when you really want to say 我要问你, I want to ask you, right? Or 可以问你, like can I ask you, versus 可以问你, like can I kiss you, like that's a whole different thing. So once again, when means to kiss somebody, and when means to ask a question. So you really want to make sure in those situations you don't mess your tones up. But so those are kind of examples in which make people get scared about tones, and oh my gosh, you can't listen. So with that out of the way, let me now explain why tones aren't as scary as you should think. So first thing about tones that should put you at ease is, if you're an English speaker or whatever other language you speak, is tones are part of every language. And what do I mean by that? So we use tones in English all the time. We just don't really think about it in the way that we do in the way that the Chinese use tones. So what does that mean? So for example, if I'm going to make a statement like, what's a good example of a statement? Yeah, just like he wants to go to the store, right? That's a statement. He wants to go to the store. But if I say he wants to go to the store, I change my tone, I raise it, which is like a second tone in Chinese. He wants to go to the store. What? That's like asking, like, he wants to go to the store? Like, he wants to go? You're implying that, like, either you're asking a question, like, does he want to go to the store? Or you're asking, like, I thought he didn't want to go, right? That kind of thing. Or if you like were to do more of a command from like, he wants to go to the store. Like I don't care what you think. He wants to go to the store. Take him to the store, right? And that's just one example. But like, so the fourth tone in Chinese is kind of similar to or the same as a command tone we use in English, like no, yes, right? Like I don't want that, right? Like that's kind of a fourth tone. And then you like the question way we raise our voice for questions, like huh? Can you do that? Really? Are you sure? That's a second tone, and that's what they use in Mandarin as a second tone. So our question tone is what we is the second tone in Chinese, and then like and then if you kind of raise your voice higher, like kind of higher up, like I'm thinking, maybe, I'm not sure, like I don't know, like that's kind of a first tone, and then kind of lower register voice, like let me think about that. I don't know, like that's kind of a third tone. So we use tones to express ourselves in English. It's just that we don't. It's just that words still convey the same meaning, regardless of how we use our tones. So, like for example, going back to the he wants to go to the store example, no matter if you say store, 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 it all means store. It all means a place in which you go buy goods, right? Whereas in Chinese, ma, all have completely different meanings depending upon how you pronounce the words. So that is something that is a difference. But once again, it's important to know that we use tones all the time in English. And there's a really good video by I'm on this channel, kind of pimping other channels, but there's a really good Yo-Yo Chinese, the Yo-Yo Chinese YouTube channel, Yo-Yo Chinese, has a really, really good video all about this that breaks down tones. So definitely go to their channel for a much more detailed breakdown of tones and how they work. And a lot of the examples I'm talking about, they'll talk about as well, but with much better instruction. But just the point is tones is something that we use in English. The other thing about tones too is once you get more comfortable enough with tones, and you're really confident in what you're saying, then maybe there's maybe once in a blue moon, like you'll get a tone wrong, right? And that's not the end of the world, right? Because Chinese is very context driven. So Chinese has a lot of homophones, and so you have to pick out. You got to tell by the context what somebody's saying. So, for example, the word for lion and wet are pronounced the same. Sh first tone. So shi first tone. Sh means wet, and sh also means lion. Although if you want to say a lion, you'd actually say shizi, which kind of makes it I don't even know that. But nonetheless, like sh means wet and sh means lion. Okay, so like obviously, depending on the context, now if you wanted to say a wet lion, you would call it like a shish. But and that's what makes Chinese tongue twisters fun, is you have fun with the homophones and things like that. But obviously, like depending on the context, like if you would say like, oh, the ifu han shi, like my clothing is wet, right? No one's gonna think, oh my gosh, like his clothing is a lion. Like no one's gonna think that. And if you get like one tone slightly wrong, but the rest of the tones in your sentence are fine, then people will still understand what you're saying. You'll just, they might correct you and say, oh, like I understand what you said, but like that's really supposed to be a first tone instead of a second tone, or supposed to be a third tone instead of a fourth, etc. Okay, so that's a good thing. So context is really key in Mandarin and in Chinese, and so as long as most of your tones are right, like people will still understand what you're saying. Even going back to the example of when to kiss versus when to ask. Once again, it might be a little embarrassing if you said kiss instead of ask, but like based on the context, people will know what you're saying, right? One thing I will say about tones is it's the second and third tone. Okay, the second and third tone. Okay, let me kind of quickly write these down actually for you guys here. I don't want to I do think it's good for me to write stuff down some of the time. So obviously one of the things you will learn in Chinese is what it's called tone marks. Okay, I got a pencil here. Let's use a pen. Okay, and so what tone marks are basically what indicate like what tone is being used for the word. Okay, like in the pinyin. So going back to the ma example. Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna kind of flip this bad boy around. You can see right there. Oh, wrong T. So you see the first tone right there with the lines on top of it. Kind of get this a little closer. Sorry for the shadows. But yeah, you can kind of see that first line right there. That means first tone. So you just see a flat line above it. Means it's a first tone. You see the tone kind of rising up, makes it a second tone. And third tone, is the check mark, the V basically. That's a third tone. And then you see a mark going downward like that. That's the fourth tone. And I was going to say that these two tones, the second and third tone, are often are the hardest to master because they sound kind of similar. This is something that I've had a tough time with. So the second tone, the one that kind of that just goes up, ma, right, versus ma. Those are easy to get confused with each other. So much so that if you have going back to this, for example, if you have two third tones back to back, the rule is that the first third tone word you see becomes a second tone. Okay, so it's similar enough that sometimes due to the, like, if you were to say like hun hao, you would just say hun hao because it's just so hard to say. Like it's hard to kind of go hun hao. It's just so they'll switch it to the first word becomes the second tone. So hun hao. That's how you say that. But the second and third tones like are kind of tricky are kind of tricky to differentiate sometimes. And as a Chinese learner myself, it's still something that I'm working on. So definitely like expect those kind of challenges to come your way. But yeah, beware of that third tone that tone change rule. There's other tone change rules as well. I don't really want to get into that in this video. It's kind of a different topic. But like for example, the character bu means not. If it's a fourth tone word, but if another fourth tone word comes after it, then it becomes a second tone. So like for example, a way of saying like oh no problem or like you're welcome, and like it's kind of a colloquial kind of Taiwanese way of saying or Taiwan Mandarin way of saying it. And just so we're clear, the Mandarin spoken in Taiwan and mainland China is the same. It's just like there's slight differences in terms of vocabulary. But like, if you're gonna say like bu hui, back to back fourth tone, bu becomes the second tone, bu hui, like no problem, right? So just be aware of those tone changing rules. But they're really easy to get a grasp of. Just gotta be aware of them. But yeah, like that's the back to kind of what I want to talk about earlier. Just in general tones, like you do gotta learn them, but it's not something to like get really super freaked out about, right? Just practice them. You'll get better at it. I do recommend Google Translate as an app, as a tool to help you practice your tones, and other apps as well. But just basically like speak into them. If they understand you, then it means you're getting your tones right. Although they sometimes mess up. I did a whole video on that, but like the point is like that can help you with your tones. But yeah, that's kind of it. Now, one other thing I did want to quickly touch on really quickly before I close out this video is touching quickly on the Japanese side. Nihongo ga. So Japanese is not a tonal language. Okay, like in the sense that like if I were to say like this is a really basic Japanese phrase, but like if I were to say watashi wa Amerikajin desu, it's saying I am an American. Right? It's a very basic Japanese phrase. Watashi wa Amerikajin desu. No matter how I say that, if I say watashi wa Amerikajin desu, like I'm still saying I'm an American. It doesn't change it, right? So in that sense, Japanese is free from tones in that sense. But at the same time, Japanese still is tonal in the sense that there are certain times in which you have to like raise your intonation a little bit with certain words. So if you're learning Japanese, you still will want to be aware of that. So a really basic example of that in Japanese, and I'll let you go, is the way they say the days of the week in Japanese. So like Monday in Japanese is getsuyobi, okay? And then Tuesday is kayobi. And then Wednesday is suyobi. And then mokuyobi, kinyobi, Doyobi, Nichiyobi, okay? And if you're referenced, that means moon day, fire day, water day, wood day, gold day, earth day, and just Sunday. But the yobi part. So that's how to say Wednesday in Japanese. Suyobi. See, my voice kind of raised a little bit. Yobi, okay? Kinyobi for Friday, okay? So, and that's just one example in Japanese. There's others I've come across as well, but I've been recently studying how to say days of the week in Japanese, and that's a really easy example, a really good example of how there are tones used in Japanese. So, and in Japanese, it's much more about just sounding more authentic and sounding more native with your Japanese pronunciation, but just be aware of that, okay, in Japanese. But obviously with Chinese, the tones it's way more essential, because if you say a tone wrong, you literally get the word wrong. Now, one other thing I want to quickly address, really quickly address, well, two things, and if you want to check out at this point, feel free to, but there's two things I'm going to quickly address, and if you don't find this part interesting, you can move on. One of them really quickly is on the, just some of the subtle differences between the Mandarin spoken in Taiwan and China, and how that and how tone plays a role in that and in Chinese. And the second one is quickly if you're curious about Cantonese and how their tones work. So, but if you're not interested in that, you can just move on from this video now. But I'm going to dive into that really quickly. Okay, I've warned you. So first of all, really quickly, on the difference between the Mandarin Chinese spoken in Taiwan and mainland China. A lot of people ask about this, and this is and by the way, there's a lot of really great YouTube videos from like Off the Great Wall, Yo-Yo Chinese, etc. that like go into like learn Chinese now. That like really good videos that really go into the differences between the Chinese, the Mandarin spoken in mainland China, and Taiwan. And as far as it pertains, so there's two key things to know about that. And I'll tell you how this connects to tone. First of all, just some words are different. Just that. Okay, so like the words for like taxi, subway, things like that, they're just different. They're really different words. But as far as where it goes into tone, and that's what I want to get into today, is take one example. How do you say week in Mandarin Chinese? There's actually multiple ways, but one of the ways to say week in Mandarin Chinese is xingqi. That's like the first one you come across, right? There's also zhou, there's also li bai, but xingqi is kind of the most common one that I've come across, at least when people are teaching it. How to say week in Chinese, you say xingqi, back to back first tone. Okay, let me show you. Write this down. Okay, so xingqi. Okay, and then okay, so here we go. So as you can see here, sorry, tone's wrong on this one. Okay, here we go. So as you can see here, this is how you say week in Chinese. Okay, so like days of the week, weekday. Okay, so the top one is mainland China. I'll just say mainland for short, and the other one is Taiwan. Okay, this is just one example. There's many other examples of this, but xingqi is how you say week in Mandarin in mainland China. Xingqi, and if you're from Taiwan, you're gonna hear xingqi, second tone. Okay, so once again, how to say week in Chinese? It's xingqi if you're in mainland China, and it's xingqi if xingqi. Okay, got the term right, second tone. Xingqi if you're in Taiwan. So, it's important to also note, and the reason why I'm bringing this up in the tone in this video is because it's important to know that sometimes words are pronounced a little bit differently depending on the region that they're from. Okay, so someone's from Taiwan, they might say a word slightly differently. There's a really good channel called Mandarin HQ. I think I mentioned that in my first video, Mandarin Headquarters, Mandarin HQ. Angel Huang is her name. And she's really good, and she's got a whole video on this, like how differences between mainland Chinese and Taiwan Chinese, and it's just Mandarin is Mandarin no matter where you go, but because the Chinese speaking world is so large, because China is so big, 中国很大, right? China is very big. People pronounce things differently depending on where they're from, and even to the point where the tones are different. Just like 星期 versus 星期, right? Like there's a difference there. So also be aware of that as well, and understand that someone could correct you on your Chinese, and you could be saying it right, but they just might be from a different place, and once they say it differently. And sometimes too, like there's other examples. There's a really good video, A Monkey Abroad, the Monkey Abroad channel, where Jamie Lawman walks around Shanghai and tests people on their Chinese character abilities, right? Chinese characters. And a lot of people like mispronounce like the characters or a lot of people mispronounce characters, and it had to do with like the different regional dialects across China. So that has an influence as well on people's tones. So just be prepared for people to say things a different way, or maybe use a different tone than what you're taught in the textbook, and just know that that's because they're being influenced by their regional dialect. Okay, and then finally, lastly, just really quickly on Cantonese. So I can only speak like very basic. Like I don't know a lot of Cantonese right now. Just like counting to 10, for example. Yeah, like just very basic. Nei hao, like hello, like 你做干嘛, like how have you been recently, like very basic. 早晨, good morning. 起立, goodbye. I mean, very basic stuff in Cantonese. But you'll hear with Cantonese that like Cantonese has more tones than Mandarin. This is kind of above my pay grade because my Cantonese is very basic, and I'm really just focusing on Mandarin and then Japanese. But if you're curious, the only real difference between what makes Cantonese tones different from Mandarin tones is just that Cantonese is octave sensitive. So what that basically means is, I'll give you a really basic example here. So, and I don't even know what all these mean. Well, basically in Cantonese you have right here. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, okay, here we go. Boom and boom. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so this is kind of very poorly drawn here. But you have a high flat tone in Cantonese. Then you have a high rising tone. Then you have a mid flat pitch tone. You have a low rising tone, a low falling tone, and then a low flat tone. So a good example is the word "si." I don't have all of them memorized what they mean in Cantonese, but you could go "si, si, 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 si." Okay, so that's just a really quick. Like I said, I'm not learning Cantonese, but like the point is with Cantonese tones, it's just important to know in Cantonese that it's much more pitch sensitive. So si, 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 right? So that's 3 different ways of saying the same kind of using flat tones, right? So, and then it's the same thing as Mandarin. It's just rising and falling. Si, si, back to ma versus ma, right? So second versus fourth tone, right? The only difference is that one of them's a higher, one of them is said lower. So it's basically like high flat tone, and then it's high rising, and then it's mid flat tone, and then it's low rising, low falling, and then low flat. Okay, so that's how Cantonese tones work if you're interested. But anyway, that's kind of it for the video. So just to kind of quickly recap, are tones something to be afraid of? No, they're not, as long as you put the time in. Do understand that you do need to learn your tones. They are important, and it just takes time and practice to memorize them. And if it makes you all feel better, I've been learning Chinese for 2.5 years. Learning Chinese for 2.5 years, and I still gotta like pull up my Pleco app sometimes and just double check and make sure that I'm using the right tone for a word. So I'm like, oh, how do you say that word again? Like I know what the word is, but is it second or third tone? So just know that like even if you're learning Chinese for a while, you're gonna have those moments where you're gonna have to like double check your tone, make sure it's right. And then obviously like on the Japanese side, Japanese is not a tonal language. So tones aren't used in the same way, but still there are times we got to raise your voice a little bit to sound more authentic, and it is technically a part of the pronunciation. So just in general, if you're learning any language, I think you want to try to sound as native as possible. And that in and of itself involves tone, it involves pronunciation, right? And so no matter what language you learn, you want to sound as native as possible. But anyway, I think I've rambled on enough of this video. But let me know what you guys think. And feel free to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. And as far as like how to check out how to connect with me on social media, I'll put the links in the description below. But Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the handle is slamdunk406. I'll put a link in that below. But that's a way to connect with me on social media. I do a lot of my basketball stuff on there, mostly basketball writing, but I do whip out some Chinese on there and share some of my Chinese journey on there as well. So feel free to connect with me there. And as a little bonus, as you can see here, I'll kind of flip to this here. This is my Anaheim Amigos hat. So the Anaheim Amigos were an ABA franchise that folded, but they were an actual team. I think they became the Utah Stars, actually. So for a Utah Stars fan, Utah Jazz fan, whatever, you remember the Utah Stars, I believe they were the Anaheim Amigos before that. So that's a little bonus word, a little bonus fact for you guys. And friend in Chinese, of course, is 朋友. So that's how I say Chinese. That's how I say friend in Chinese is 朋友. And so if you want to know how to say Anaheim Amigos in Chinese, I'm not sure how to say Anaheim in Chinese, but you would say the Anaheim 朋友们, right? So if you just add men at the end of it, it makes it plural. So 朋友们, friends, and amigos, friends in Spanish. So anyway, that's it for the video. Once again, hope you guys found this video to be helpful. Let me know your thoughts, and if you have any tips for me on how to learn Chinese or anything at all, don't hesitate to leave a comment. So thanks, and have a wonderful day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.